My family kicked me out on my birthday. Now they're trying to label my new place as a family property. Hey, I'm Robin, and I've got quite a story to tell. I'm 27, and lately life has been a whirlwind. I work as a marketing assistant. Not the most glamorous gig, but it keeps some of the bills paid. Okay, just some of them. I used to live in a rundown little house with my parents and younger brother Tom. The place was cramped, falling apart, and always had a weird smell, but it was still home. Or at least I thought it was. To be clear, I've contributed a lot to that place. I paid most of the bills, bought groceries, and took care of repairs whenever things broke down. You'd think I'd get some appreciation for that, right? But no. Every time I entered a room, my mom, Susan, would talk to me like I was a total disappointment. "Robin, when are you going to get a real job?" That was her favorite jab. I mean, what does she even mean by real job? I work my butt off in marketing. It's not easy, but to her, unless I'm a doctor or lawyer, it doesn't count. Whenever I tried to explain myself, the response was the same. "If it's a real job, you'd already have your own place?" "Sure, Mom." And then there's Tom, my 26-year-old brother. We never really got along. He always acted superior, as if being popular online made him better than me, . He barely lifts a finger around the house. And guess who picks up the slack? That's right, me. But does anyone notice? Nope. Anyway, my 28th birthday was around the corner, and despite knowing better, I let myself feel a little excited. Foolish, huh? But I really thought this year might be different. I even splurged on a nice cake from a fancy bakery downtown. I pictured a small family gathering, just the four of us. Nothing grand, but I hoped they might care. So a few days before, I sat down with my parents, Mark and Susan, to bring it up. "Hey, I thought maybe we could do something for my birthday this weekend. Just hang out and have some cake?" I asked, keeping my hopes in check. Mom didn't even glance up from her magazine. "We'll see, Robin. We might have plans." "Plans? It's my birthday." I should have sensed something was off, but I didn't want to believe it. I mean, I've been here all my life, helping out, doing my part. Why would they plan something without me? Fast forward to my birthday, and I was in high spirits. I went to work, got some happy birthday texts from coworkers, and even treated myself to some new clothes. It felt like things were finally looking up. I hoped that when I came home there'd be some small gesture, maybe a card, a cake, anything. But as I pulled into the driveway, my stomach dropped. My things were out on the front lawn, boxes and bags, clothes and books. Everything was just dumped like garbage. I jumped out of the car, heart racing, and rushed up to the porch, and there they were. My parents and Tom just staring at me. It felt like a twisted family meeting. My chest tightened, and I couldn't think straight. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Mom stepped forward, her face blank and uncaring. "Robin, it's time for you to move out. You're not welcome here anymore." I just stood there, frozen, trying to process her words. "Move out." On my birthday. What kind of cruel joke was this? I looked to Dad, hoping he'd step in, say something, anything to show this was some misunderstanding. But no, he just looked away, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. I felt anger and confusion boiling up inside. "But it's my birthday," I whispered. "Where am I supposed to go?" My voice cracked, and I hated how desperate I sounded. Tom chimed in, smirking in a way that made me want to scream. "Maybe you should have thought about that before being such a burden all these years." A burden. Me, the one who paid the bills, bought food, and kept that crumbling house from falling apart. How was I the burden? I looked at my mom, pleading silently for some answer that made sense. "It wasn't enough," she said coldly. "We need the space. And frankly, you need to grow up." That was it. No sympathy, no second chances, just ice-cold indifference. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to break in front of them. "Can I at least get my stuff?" I asked, barely able to get the words out. "It's all packed," Mom replied, waving at the boxes in the yard as if it was no big deal. "You should leave now." And that was that. Happy birthday to me, right? I started loading the boxes into my car, hands trembling. It felt surreal, like I was trapped in someone else's nightmare. I wanted to yell, cry, demand how they could be so heartless. But I didn't. I just kept moving, one box at a time, trying to hold myself together. When I'd packed the last of my things, I turned to look at them one last time, hoping, praying they'd realize how wrong this all was. Why today? Why on my birthday? I managed to ask. Mom didn't even flinch. Consider it our gift to you, independence. And with that, I left. On what should have been a day of celebration, I found myself driving away from the only home I'd ever known, with no clue where I'd end up. I landed at a dingy motel with a flickering neon sign out front. I spent my birthday alone, surrounded by hastily packed belongings. I sat there staring at the ceiling, wondering how the people I thought loved me could be so heartless. How could they do this to their own child on her birthday? That night, I vowed never to depend on them again. I would pull myself up no matter how difficult it became, because plainly, I was on my own now. After the whole birthday incident, I felt like I'd been struck by a truck. It wasn't just about being tossed out either. Yeah, that sucked. It was learning that the individuals I assumed were supposed to have my back just didn't care. I spent the night at a dirty motel trying to make sense of everything, but it was impossible. So the next day, I did the only thing I could think of. I poured myself into work. I mean, what else would I do? I couldn't simply sit around feeling sorry for myself. I had expenses to pay, and I needed to locate somewhere to live. Hanakama, my manager, recognized something was odd right away. I was at the office at all hours, crouched over my laptop and answering emails like a robot. She's clever, and it didn't take her long to draw me aside. It was late, and the office was nearly deserted when she discovered me at my desk. "Robin, could we talk?" she inquired, leaning on the side of my cubicle. When I glanced up, she gave me a concerned look, so I must have looked like a mess. "At this pace, you're going to burn yourself out. What's happening?" I didn't want to discuss it, but she asked. Everything simply came out. I told her everything. How my family kicked me out. As I spoke, I was still residing in this awful hotel with my belongings in boxes. Hannah S expression relaxed. She said nothing at first, just listened. This was more than my family had ever done. When I finished, she sighed and asked why I hadn't told her sooner. I shrugged, ashamed. I mean, she is my boss, not my therapist. However, she didn't appear to mind. "Look, Robin, I have a spare room at my apartment. Not much, but you're welcome to stay while you figure things out." I could not believe it. I wasn't sure how to answer at first. "Are you serious?" I inquired, half expecting her to alter her mind, but she simply smiled and nodded. "Of course, I understand what it's like to be in a bad situation. Do not worry about it." I felt so relieved. I nearly burst into tears again, but I managed to keep my composure. "Thank you," I whispered. "I'm not sure how to repay you." She waved me off. "Do not even discuss it. You've been crushing it at work, and I'd hate to see you burn out. Just promise me that you will take care of yourself." And with that, I had a place to stay. It was not home, but it was something. I packed up my belongings from the hotel and moved into Hannah's guest room the next day. It was a little small, but it was clean, warm, and quiet, all I needed at the time. My first night there, I sat on the bed trying to digest everything. I felt slightly better, but there was still a hole in my chest. I felt as if everything I thought I knew had been taken away, but I didn't let myself get too down. I pushed myself even harder at work, if that's possible. Hannah wasn't joking when she claimed she'd push me harder, and I actually enjoyed it. It kept me preoccupied. I also started doing more freelancing work. I figured that the more money I could save, the sooner I'd be able to go out on my own. It wasn't simple, however. Some evenings I stayed up until 3 a.m., gazing at my computer, attempting to crank out drawings as my thoughts kept going back to my family. I kept thinking that they would call. Perhaps they would apologize. Perhaps they'd recognize their mistake. But nothing. The radio is silent. During all of this, my best buddy Mike was a lifesaver. We had been friends since college, and although we didn't live in the same city anymore, we remained close. I informed him what had happened, and he was outraged. "I can't believe they did that to you," he stated during one of our phone chats. "You deserve better." He wasn't mistaken, but it still hurt. "Yeah, that's what it is," I mumbled. "I simply need to keep pushing forward." Mike, being the comedian he is, attempted to lighten the atmosphere. "What irritates them the most?" he replied with a chuckle. "You're getting really successful and sticking it in their faces." I laughed, but the concept stayed with me. Not like I sought vengeance or anything. Okay, maybe a bit, but basically I wanted to convince myself that I didn't need them. I could do it on my own. So that became my purpose. Work harder. save more, and finally move out of Hannah's guest room and into my own apartment. Things gradually improved over the next few months. My designs were being recognized by larger clients, and I was making more money than I ever had. I told myself that every late night and all-nighter was worthwhile. Honestly, it was. I was slowly reconstructing my life, one project at a time. I began to wonder if I really needed my family. Sure, it hurt, and it probably always will, but I was demonstrating to myself that I could make it without them. I wasn't simply surviving. I was prospering, and it felt great. Hannah once drew me into her office with a wide grin on her face. "Robin, I have some good news," she remarked. "How does a lead designer sound to you?" With a raise, of course. I was speechless. "Are you serious?" I blurted out, feeling like I was going to pass out from joy. "Dead serious," she answered, still smiling. "You have earned it. You done tremendous work, and it's time to honor it." I could not believe it. Lead designer. Me. I felt exhausted from all of my hard work, restless nights, and worry. It had finally paid off. "Thank you," I managed to utter it while still in astonishment. "Don't thank me yet," she added, winking. "You'll have a lot more responsibility now." I didn't care. I was prepared for it. This was what I'd been working for with the increase and all of the freelance work I'd been accumulating. I was now at a point where I could consider my future steps. I wasn't going to remain in Hannah's guest room indefinitely. Now I could start looking for my own house. However, it was, more than simply money or a job. It was about feeling like I had control of my life again. For so long, I had felt stuck. I am stuck in that house with my family, stuck in their expectations of me and their judgment. But now I was free. I was making my own decisions and shaping my own life. And nobody could take that away from me. I was finally moving forward, and it felt great. A few weeks after being promoted to lead designer, I began to feel more in control of my life. I've been working hard, earning money, and was even considering buying my own house shortly. Things were looking extremely good for me. But of course, just when you think everything is going well, life decided to throw a wrench in the works. It started on a random Wednesday afternoon. I was in the midst of working on this large assignment when my phone rang. I didn't think much about it, just assumed it was an email or something. But as I looked at the computer, I saw the name I didn't anticipate. Tom. My brother. This was the last person I wanted to hear from. For a little while, I just gazed at the phone. Part of me did not want to answer. I hadn't heard from Tom or my parents since they booted me out on my birthday, and I really didn't miss them. But curiosity got the best of me, so I picked up. "Hey," I remarked, attempting to keep my tone neutral. "Robin? It's me," Tom responded, his voice softer than normal. It wasn't his typical arrogant tone that threw me off. "I know it's you," I remarked, little irritated. "What do you want?" There was a long delay on the other end, and for a second I assumed he had hung up. But as he spoke again, I could sense the hesitancy in his voice. "I need help." I raised an eyebrow, unable to believe what I was hearing. Tom is in need of my assistance. The same brother who stood by and watched as my belongings were tossed out onto the front yard. "Yes, right. I'm not sure what to tell you," I said, already felt the rage rising inside me. "You made it apparent that I am no longer part of the family. He breathed out a sigh. "Look, I understand things have been difficult, but this is not about that. It's about Dad. He lost his job and Mom's spending has gotten out of control. I can't afford education anymore." There it was, the true purpose for the call. It was not about me making atonement or caring about what had happened. It was about money. It was always about money. I bit my lip, fighting back the flood of emotions that had overwhelmed me. A part of me wanted to tell him off, to remind him of how they treated me, to hang up and not look back. But there's another part of me, a little dumb bit, still felt a sense of responsibility. They were my family, after all. Or they used to be. "So let me clarify," I said, my tone rougher than I intended. "You are phoning me now after months of stillness. You need money." "It's not only about the money," Tom swiftly added. "We're in a horrible situation, Robin. You know how Mom is. She's been spending like crazy. And Dad. He's not doing well without a job. I do not know what to do." I took a deep breath and tried to retain my calm. "That seems like your problem, Tom, not mine." "Come on, Robin. We're family," he explained. and I could almost sense the anguish in his voice. It was the first time in years he sounded vulnerable, but I wasn't buying it. Family, I scoffed. I couldn't keep the anger out of my voice. You kicked me out on my birthday. That is not something that the family does. He did not have an explanation for it, just a long delay, and truthfully, the stillness told me everything I needed to know. I stated firmly, I'm done being your backup plan. You, Mom, and Dad made it very obvious where I stood with you all. Do not call me again. Before you could react, I hung up. My fingers shook slightly as I put the phone on my desk. I felt an odd combination of rage, despair, and relief. It felt amazing to stand up for myself and finally say no. However, it was unfortunate that things had come to this. I sat there for a few minutes, staring at the wall and trying to digest everything. I couldn't stop thinking about all the times I'd gone above and beyond for my family, putting my own happiness aside for theirs. And where had it led me? I'm homeless on my birthday. It was time to quit feeling terrible about walking away. They made their decision, and I had made mine. After that call, I jumped right back into work. I didn't want to focus on it for too long since I knew it would just bring me down. So I concentrated on the project I was working on, attempting to shove Tom and my parents to the back of my mind. However, once such notions take hold, they are difficult to overcome. That night, as I laid in bed, I kept repeating the discussion in my thoughts. I kept thinking of what I could have said, what I should have said. I wanted to think that they were genuinely apologetic, but I knew better. They were not phoning because they missed me or regretted what they had done. They had called because they needed something from me, and I was not going to let them exploit me again. The next morning, I awoke with more determination than ever. It was time to focus on myself, on establishing my life, career, and future. I couldn't keep looking back. I couldn't stop thinking if things could have been different. They were not. And it was the fact. I made a pledge to myself starting that day. I was not going to allow my family bring me down anymore. I'd gone through enough, and I was now in a position where I could start to construct something positive for myself. I wasn't going to let them destroy that. Sure. Part of me felt awful for cutting them off and not assisting them when they were plainly in need. But then I recalled myself. Where were they while I was struggling? Where were they when I needed help? Yeah, I did not know anything about them, so I continued going. I worked hard, saved money, and stayed focused on the future. And every time I felt the old guilt sneak in, I remembered myself of that phone conversation. They'd made their bed, and now they had to sleep in it. I wasn't going to be their safety net anymore, and it felt nice to finally be free. I eventually saved enough money to buy a really good apartment, and it's truly the finest thing that has happened to me. I was in the middle of a project, knee-deep in designs, utterly concentrated. The doorbell rang. At first, I suspected it was a shipment or something. I had been ordering a lot of items for work, so I didn't think twice about it. But as I looked at the surveillance camera, I froze. They're standing on my doorstep with my parents and Tom. My stomach made this strange flip, and I felt as if someone had hit me. They hadn't contacted me since Tom's call many weeks ago. I thought we were over, so why the heck were they here? I took a long breath, attempting to relax myself before opening the door. My mind was racing with all of the many reasons they could be standing there. Maybe they came here to apologize, or maybe they simply needed something else. Honestly, I wasn't sure which would be worse. When I answered the door, my mother, Susan, did not even wait for me to say anything. She surged by me as if she owned the space. Her gaze scanned my living room as if she were evaluating it. "Robin, you've done exceptionally well for yourself. She smiled strangely, as if it wasn't a grin at all. I simply stood there, startled. Tom followed her, looking uncomfortable, and my father, Mark, slid in last. His hands were pushed into his pockets as if he didn't know what to do with himself. "What are you all doing here?" I inquired, attempting to keep my voice calm. My pulse was beating, and I could feel stress growing within me. I knew this wouldn't be a nice talk, but I was praying I was mistaken. Mom turned around. That phony smile remained on her face. "We're here to discuss living arrangements." I blinked, perplexed. "What?" Dad cleared his throat and for the first time since their arrival spoke. "We believe it is time for the family to get back together." I nearly laughed. It was quite ludicrous. So ludicrous that I assumed they were joking for a little while. "You are kidding, right?" I inquired, my voice filled with incredulity. Mom's grin vanished and she crossed her arms, staring at me as if I were being ridiculous. "No, Robin. We've spoken about it and we believe it's time for us to live together as a family again." I gazed at her, stunned. This had to be some sort of joke. After all that has transpired, you have booted me out of my birthday party and now you want to move in with me. Tom, who had been silent until now, spoke out with his typical condescending tone. "Come on, Robin, don't be too theatrical. This is all in the past." I felt my blood boiling. Everything in the past. You kicked me out on my birthday, you abandoned me with nowhere to go, no support, nothing. And now you want to just walk back into my life as if nothing happened? Mom's expression tightened. "We gave you the push you needed," she remarked in a chilly voice. "And see how much better you've done as a result. You should thank us." I couldn't believe what I heard. They tried to claim credit for my accomplishment, for everything. I had worked my ass off for this. So what? You think you can just walk up and take credit for my hard work? And what? Move in here. This is my house, not yours. Dad, stepping forward in an attempt to play the role of mediator. "Robin, be realistic. We quote re-suffering right now. You have all this room and we thought it would be good to come together again." I shook my head, my aggravation increasing with each word they spoke. "You only came here because you needed something. You didn't care about me when I was hurting, and now you want me to assist you. That's not how it works." Mom's face contorted in rage. "We are your family, Robin. We made a sacrifice for you. Everything you have is because of us. I couldn't hold back any longer. Sacrificed. What precisely did you forego, Mom? You kicked me out. You did not aid me when I needed it the most. You tossed me away as if I were nothing, and now you believe you are entitled to my achievement, to my house." She opened her mouth to argue. But I wasn't finished. I've worked hard for it. I made this life for myself with no aid from you. You cannot stroll in here and make a claim. Tom rolled his eyes. "God, Robin, stop being so selfish. We only need a little support." The word selfish irritated me. "Selfish?" I snapped. "You want to talk about selfishness? How about you all chuck me out of the house and leave me with nothing? How about you come here now and insist that I provide you a place to stay? Because you've messed up your own life. Tom, you're being selfish, not me." Dad stepped forward again, his voice quieter and almost imploring. "Robin, please. We're only asking for a chance." I took a long breath, attempting to quiet the fury roaring within me. "No, you do not get to do this. You can't use me anymore." Mom's eyes narrowed. "Fine. If you choose to be difficult, we will take legal action. We have rights, you understand." I couldn't believe what I heard. Legal action was taken. "On what grounds?" "We'll find something," she responded, her voice full of malice. "Do not push me, Robin." I gave out a sour laugh. "Go ahead. Try. But allow me to tell you something. This is my home, and you have no right to it. You are not moving in. Not now. Not ever." They said nothing for a moment. I could see the wrath and fury on their expressions, but I didn't care. I was not backing down. Finally, I stepped up to the front door and opened it wide. "Get out." I spoke it in my own voice. "Keep it steady now." They paused briefly, but I stayed solid, waiting for them to depart. Mom huffed, casting me a hateful glare before stomping out. Dad followed her, appearing to want to say something, but he didn't. Then Tom, who was shaking his head in bewilderment, went out without saying anything. As soon as they left, I closed the door and leaned against it. Take a deep breath. My pulse was still beating and my hands shook, but I felt a strange sensation of relaxation, as if a weight had been removed from my shoulders. I was not going to let them take advantage of me again. Not now, not ever. After I kicked my family out of the house, things became silent again. I am not going to lie. That was a relief. For the first time in a long time, I felt in charge of my own life. I wasn't always waiting for the other shoe to drop, but deep inside I knew it wasn't the end. My mother had made the threat of legal action, and while I didn't believe she had a case, I couldn't escape the notion that they weren't done trying to sneak back into my life. A few days later, Mike called me. He is one of my closest friends, and fortunately for me, he is also a lawyer. I had mentioned the entire matter to him in passing, but I had not gone into all the specifics. Now that my family had crossed the line, I decided it was time to seek expert guidance. "Hello, Robin. Dot." When I responded, Mike continued, "You are free to talk. I have been thinking about your circumstance." "Sure," I said, suddenly feeling a little worried. "What up?" "I've been looking into your parents' predicament a little further," he explained, his tone becoming more serious. "I know you indicated they've been struggling financially, and you're concerned they'll do anything nefarious. Well, I conducted some research, and it turns out they're in more danger than you anticipated. Dot." My heart fell. I did not want to hear it, but I knew I had to. "What do you mean?" I asked. "There has been a history of financial problems, Robin. Tax problems, debt. It is not simply that. Your dad lost his job, and your mother has been overspending. They have been digging themselves a hole for years, and now that you've made it plain, they can't count on you. Dot." They quote, "becoming desperate." I sat there contemplating what Mike was saying. My thoughts rushed back to my mother's arrogant threats, her mention of legal action, and her claim to all I'd toiled for. It made sense now. This wasn't simply about seeking assistance. They were looking for a way out of their own predicament, and they viewed me as the solution. Dot. "So what should I do?" I asked. I feel the usual weight of tension descending on my shoulders. Mike remained silent for a second before responding. "First and foremost, defend yourself. They may not have a good case for stealing anything from you, but people do dumb things when they are desperate. We should petition for a restraining order to ensure that they do not bother you anymore. You quote, gathered sufficient evidence of their actions, those threats popping up at your residence. It's time to take some legal action. A restraining order? That sounds severe, but I felt it was the correct decision. My family had already demonstrated that they did not respect my limits, and if they were desperate enough to continue pushing, I needed to defend myself. I will do that." I spoke with resolve. "Let's file a restraining order." Mike guided me through the process, and within a few days, we had everything in motion. It wasn't simply about preventing them from going to my place. It was about finally drawing a line. I wasn't going to let them pull me into the chaos. I had fought too hard to get to where I was, and I wasn't going to allow their problems impede my development while all of this was occurring. I observed anything weird. I began receiving strange messages from common friends, people who knew my family but hadn't communicated in a long time. They were imprecise at first, but it became evident that my parents were telling lies about me. Apparently, I abandoned them when they needed me the most. I felt selfish and resentful for not helping out after everything they had done for me. It was pretty funny. The same folks who had booted me out on my birthday were now attempting to play the victim card. I couldn't believe it, and it irritated me. I had fought so hard to repair my life, and now they were attempting to destroy it by inciting others against me. I contacted Mike again, telling him about the rumors. "What will I do?" I inquired, frustrated in my tone. "Don't engage with it," he urged. "These folks don't know the whole situation, and your parents expect you to become defensive and try to justify yourself. Do not give them that delight. If the situation escalates, we'll take it to court. And believe me, you have nothing to be concerned about. It was not simple to follow Mike's suggestion. My initial inclination was to tell everyone who would listen the truth about how my family had treated me and why I had every right to cut them off. But when I thought about it, I realized Mike was correct. I was unfamiliar with anyone or any explanation. I knew the truth, and that was plenty. Weeks passed, and the judicial processes progressed. Mike was a beast in court, and when the restraining order was issued, I felt a great weight lifted off my shoulders. My family couldn't get near me, and if they tried any more tricks, they'd be in big legal trouble. However, it was not the end of their issues. Remember the financial concerns Mike mentioned? They turned out to be worse than we expected. Mike discovered that my parents had been avoiding taxes for years. They had been concealing money and forging paperwork, and now the IRS was on their trail. It was almost beautiful to see the catastrophe they had created for themselves disintegrate right in front of them. I wanted to feel horrible for them. I could not. They had brought this upon themselves. They had made their decisions, and now they had to face the consequences. I was not going to be their rescuer anymore. One day, when everything had calmed down, I sat in my living room, looking out the window and reflecting on all that had transpired. It felt unusual to experience a sense of closure. I quote D, spent so long feeling confined by my family's demands, manipulation, and guilt trips. And for the first time, I felt free. Mike phoned later that night to check in. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "I'm okay," I said. And for the first time, I really meant it. "It's been a crazy ride, but I'm okay." "You did the right thing, Robin," Mike remarked. "They made their choices. You made yours. Don't allow them make you feel terrible about protecting yourself." I grinned to myself. He was correct. I had stood up for myself, and I was not going to feel terrible about it. For too long, I had allowed my family to dictate how I felt and acted, and now I was finally in charge of my own life. That felt so fantastic. Story 2. Mom left me as a baby for a new family, refused to take me in when I became an orphan. Now, she wants it. So I suppose I should start by admitting that I've never had a normal connection with my mother. Actually, naming her my mother feels awkward since, to be honest, she was more of a stranger than a parent. She took off while I was only a baby. I was too young to recall her departure. But I do recall how my father, Mark, picked up the pieces and tried everything he could to raise me alone. He was my actual parent. It always was. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't entirely cut off from my mother, Sarah. I saw her every now and again, but it was like, I don't know, a random acquaintance appears in your life once in a blue moon and seems to care. The court granted her visitation every other weekend, but she seldom, if ever, followed through. I recall sitting at the window as a child, hoping she'd show up this time, but she never did. She would either leave or drop me off early since she had other arrangements. What truly bothers me is that she didn't even try. Basically, not at all. She would leave jobs only to avoid paying child support. My father busted his ass working long hours while she was out doing God knows what twice. She even went to jail for failing to pay her debts. Can you imagine going to jail because you don't want to care for your child? I found out about it through the grapevine because she didn't tell me directly. I found out from my uncle. It's messed up, right? Sarah met Phil when I was approximately 6 years old. He was about a decade older than her, and from what I could tell, he believed he was a hero for saving her. Whatever. I wasn't truly a part of their lives. I saw them around 5 times between the ages of 6 and 14. Yeah, just 5. And each time was the same, awkward, forced, and full of false grins. I despised it. They'd attempt to pretend we were a happy family, but all I could think was, who are you kidding? Phil, on the other hand, was rather unique. He truly attempted to thrust himself into my life. When I was about 10 years old, he turned up to one of my school's Father's Day festivities. My father couldn't make it that day, but I wasn't upset about it. He always made time for me in other ways, so missing one item wasn't an issue. But Phil, being Phil, saw this as his opportunity. He approached me as if he were a substitute and said, "Hi, Jamie, I can step in if you want. I am here for you." I recall gazing at him, not knowing whether to laugh or shout, "Dude, you are not my father. You aren't even close. I hardly know you, and you have no right to act as if you're standing in for him." I was nice at the time. I just said something like, "I am fine," and went away, but internally I was angry. I didn't tell my father about it since I didn't want him to feel terrible. What is the worst part? Phil would attempt to make me feel like I was missing out. He'd make tiny remarks like, "If only your father had done more for you, maybe you wouldn't feel so distant." Distant. I was close to my father. He provided me a fantastic life, whilst Sarah did not give a crap. I'd had enough of his jabs and told him straight out, "Don't talk about my father. He is better than Sarah will ever be, and he's done more for me than you could ever understand." He never did that stepdad thing with me again. Sarah and Phil were only constant in their absence. They had their own family. They had 3 children together, but I didn't know their names until much later. I was not invited to any family gatherings, birthday parties, or other events. It's as if they simply deleted me from their lives as soon as they started their new family. Losing my father when I was 14 was one of the most difficult things I've ever gone through. It seemed like my entire life had fallen apart suddenly. We're making dinner arrangements and talking about my first day of high school, and then he's gone. A heart attack like that? There is no warning, nothing. I did not even got to say goodbye. I vividly recall the events of the day. The phone call sparked fear. Everything froze. My uncles Pete and Rob came over soon away, but I couldn't hear anything they said. Everything simply became noise. I felt numb, like if someone had cut my life in two, and I was left with jagged edges. After the funeral, things moved quickly, faster than I had anticipated. The house where I grew up, which my father worked so hard to maintain for us, had to be sold. I didn't have much say about it. I didn't really have any place else to go. My uncles volunteered to take me in immediately away, something I will be eternally thankful for. They did not hesitate. Pete and Rob had always felt more like elder brothers to me than uncles, so I knew I was safe with them. Still, it seemed like I was leaving behind all I had of my father. Now comes the point where my mother and Phil appear again. Surprise, right? It had been some years since I had seen either of them. And now, following my father's death, they seem to care. They act as if they're going to sweep in and save the day. Sarah didn't even attend the funeral. Not because she was too distraught to show up. Nope, she did not have time. Can you believe it? No time to bury the guy who looked after her child when she couldn't be bothered. But Philip. Oh, he showed up. Of course he did. The funeral was ended, and I was sitting with my uncles trying to comprehend everything. When Phil approached me, I remember gazing up at him thinking, what the hell do you want? He had that awful, false, worried expression on his face like someone is just doing it for show. He sat down beside me and said, "You know, Jamie, you can always come live with Sarah and me. We have room for you." I gazed at him, unsure whether to laugh or scream. This guy, who I'd only seen maybe 5 times in my life and who wasn't even man enough to attend my mother's funeral, offered me a place to live. No comma. Thank you, dude. I wasn't going to leave. My uncle is the only genuine family I have left to live with. People who were hardly aware of my existence. I told him no, that I would stay with Pete and Rob, and that was that. Or so I thought. Phil wasn't one to give up quickly, even though he went on a rant about how important family is and how your mother and I truly want to be there for you right now. Now, where were they when I was a kid? Where were they while I was sitting at the window, waiting for Sarah to arrive for her court-ordered weekends? They now want to become parents. Too little, too late. I shut him down fairly hard after that. I told him I didn't need their sympathy or their assistance, that my father had raised me perfectly without them, and I wasn't about to welcome them into my life now just because it was convenient for them. Phil didn't like how his face turned crimson, and he began babbling about how I was only a child and didn't comprehend how difficult things had been for Sarah. Oh, please. I was not going to sit there and let him talk down to me like way. So I answered, hard for her. My father is the one who had to pick up the pieces after she abandoned me. Do not even try to appear as if she is the victim here. He rushed out after that, but not before making a passive-aggressive remark about how I'd regret leaving them out of my life. Yes, certainly. I felt like I was going to lose sleep since Sarah and Phil weren't around. Please. After that, I packed my belongings and moved in with Pete and Rob. They were incredible, honestly. I was mourning, but they let me to digest things on my own time. They did not force me to move on or get over it. They allowed me to be furious, sad, bewildered, or anything I needed to feel. They allowed me to feel it, and that is something I will always be grateful for. The fact that I was leaving my childhood home seemed strange. The spot where I had all these recollections of my father was difficult. Every place reminded me of him, from the kitchen where we'd cook together to the living room where we'd watch movies on Friday nights. It wasn't just a house for me. It was the only place I had ever felt completely protected. But it was gone now. Just like my father, and I couldn't do anything about it. I didn't get much sleep the first night at Pete and Rob's. I kept expecting my father to step in and assure me everything was going to be okay, but he was not there. And that wasn't okay. Definitely not. After that, I attempted to keep myself occupied by enrolling in school and doing anything else that would distract me from thinking too much. But no matter what I did, it always led back to that nothingness. The reality that my father was not present and will never be again. After all this, you'd think Sarah and Phil would just leave me alone. Right? Wrong. Phil phoned a couple more times after I moved home with my uncles, perhaps to reconnect or something. He would say things like, "Jamie, I know you're hurting, but your mother and I want to help you get over this. Yes, comma, since they have been quite helpful up till now." right? He once had the guts to suggest, "Your mom has changed. She's ready to support you right now. Prepare now." Now that my father was gone and they didn't have to deal with him, I told him outright that I didn't need her anymore. I needed her when I was a youngster and she was not present. It is too late. After that, I stopped taking his calls. I wanted nothing to do with any of them. They had their beautiful little family of 3 kids, and I shared mine with my uncles. I didn't need Sarah and Phil seeming to care when it was obvious they didn't. And honestly, living with Pete and Rob was enjoyable. It was not ideal. Nothing could replace my father, but things were solid. They helped me in ways Sarah and Phil never could. They showed up for me. They were present, and that was all I ever truly needed. By the time I was 27, I believed I had it all figured out with my so-called family. I'd grown quite adept at keeping my distance from Sarah and Phil, only interacting with them when absolutely necessary. I had no serious difficulties with Sarah's other family members. I wasn't very close to them, but they didn't attempt to impose the family dynamic on me, as Sarah and Phil did, so I felt it was okay to keep in touch. They were still a part of my life, although on the periphery. You understand? So when my grandparents on Sarah's side asked me to this family birthday party, I accepted without hesitation. I didn't anticipate anything dramatic. It's just an ordinary family affair. Show up, say hello, eat some cake, make small chat, then dip out. The mat is quite normal. My fiancé couldn't make there since he had work, so I decided to go alone, say hi, and get out. However, when Sarah and Phil are involved, nothing is ever that straightforward. When I first arrived to the party, everything appeared normal. My grandparents were delighted to see me, and I spoke with several cousins and aunts. It was cool, nothing strange. I noticed Sarah and Phil across the room but didn't approach them. I didn't see the point. They knew where I was, and I wasn't going to make things unpleasant by pretending we were close. So I stayed with the individuals I felt comfortable with and kept my distance. But it appears that Phil had other intentions. I was standing at the food table, grabbing a slice of cake, when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around, and there he was, Phil, with his usual false, excessively pleasant smile. I sighed internally since I knew this would be irritating. "Jamie, nice to see you." He spoke as if we were old friends. I faked a little grin. Mostly out of courtesy, I said, "Hey, Phil, I don't want to be rude in front of everyone, but I was already mentally preparing myself for whatever crappy was about to happen." He didn't spend any time getting to the point. "So I heard you were engaged. That is wonderful news." He stated it with the same phony grin. I nodded, attempting to keep it brief. "Yeah, thanks." I hoped he'd leave it at that. However, it is not how Phil operates. Sarah and I were astonished we didn't receive an invitation to the engagement party. He remarked, dropping his voice as if he were attempting to seem serious. "I mean, we are your family. I assumed we would be included." I could feel my jaw clenching, but I held it together. I was not about to cause a disturbance at a birthday celebration. It was not a large party, only close family and friends, I said, trying to be as impartial as possible. But I could already tell where this was headed, and it was not going to be good. Phil did not back down. He never does. "Well, we are a family. Jamie, Sarah and I have always considered you a member of our family, and we were disappointed not to be invited. You are aware that we care about you." That's when I felt my blood start boiling. "Do you care about me?" They had the audacity to claim they cared. I took a deep breath and tried to keep my voice quiet. "Phil, I think we both understand why you were not invited. Let's not pretend that we're close." I could see the fading smile on his face. He didn't expect me to call him out, but I wasn't about to let him get away with playing the worried parent card. He looked around as if he wanted to certain no one was listening. Then he leaned closer. "Look, Jamie, I've always tried to be there for you, and I believe it's time we moved past any problems we've had. I understand your mother wasn't ideal, but I've always considered you my daughter. I'd want to walk you down the aisle if you'll allow me." I swore. Time stands still for a second when you mentioned that. Walk me down the aisle. This person, the one who was not even present when I needed him. The arrogance. I felt my hands begin to shake and couldn't hold back any longer. "Are you fooling me now?" I exclaimed, my voice louder than I wanted. A few people close turned to stare, but I didn't mind. "You have always considered me your daughter. Phil, I barely know you." You assume that since you married my mother, you are now my father. My father died. He should be escorting me down the aisle, but he can't because he's already gone. And you? You have no authority to act as a substitute." Phil's cheeks flushed crimson. He hadn't expected me to strike out like that, but I was done holding back. "I am sad you feel this way," he remarked, attempting to seem cool, but I could tell he was angry. "I've done my best to be a father figure to you, but you've never given me the opportunity. You're aware that your father did not always do things correctly. He withheld you from us. And I believe that's why you're so upset." Oh, that was it. That was the final straw. "Don't mention my father." I snapped and moved closer to him. "He handled everything for me. Sarah was too busy running away from her duties. You have no concept what it was like for him to raise me alone when she left. And now you want to come in and pretend you're better than him, as if you deserve to take his place. Get over yourself, Phil." By this point, the entire room had become silent. Everybody was staring. But I didn't care. I was done faking. Phil simply stood there, astonished, as if you didn't know what to say. He opened and closed his mouth repeatedly. Finally, he murmured, "You are being disrespectful. You should be more appreciative to those who care about you." That was when I lost it. Grateful? What am I grateful for? You were not there, Phil. Sarah wasn't present. None of you were available when I needed them. My father was the only one who cared. And now you want me to be grateful to you? You are nothing to me. Nothing. With that, I turned and walked away. I didn't wait for his response. I didn't care. I could hear murmurs and felt everyone's glances. But it didn't matter. I was finished with the whole affair. I'm done with Phil. I'm done with Sarah. I'd had enough of pretending they weren't strangers. Later that night, one of my aunts texted me saying I should not have caused a scene and embarrassed Phil and Sarah in front of everyone. But I don't regret it. They wanted to play family, but they can't choose when they're there for me. They had years to step up, but they didn't no, I am not sorry. And I definitely don't need them at my wedding. After the big showdown at the party, I assumed that was it. I felt if I stated my point loud and clear, they would back off. But now, of course not. When the text messages began to arrive that night, I realized this was not finished. Definitely not. First, it was my Aunt Carol. She is one of those peacekeepers, you know, always trying to smooth things out and make everyone happy. She sent me a lengthy note about how I should not have publicly embarrassed Phil and Sarah at the party. "You know, Jamie, they're trying," she wrote. "Phil has always considered you as his daughter. You didn't need to disgrace him in front of everyone." I gazed at the letters for a full minute, shaking my head and attempting. Really? They had my entire life to try. I wasn't going to feel terrible about sticking up for myself after everything. So I sent back a response. If they truly cared, they would not have waited until now to act on it. I quote M, not acting nice to make them feel better about the ordeal they put me through. I didn't hear from her after that, but the real kicker came the next morning when I received a call from Sarah. I hadn't spoken to her in a long time, and to be honest, I couldn't remember when I had. Perhaps 1 year? Probably more. I nearly didn't answer, but I was intrigued what she had to say after everything. "Jamie, we need to chat," she began, her voice stiff and official, as if she were ready to give me a lecture. I sighed, already regretting having answered the phone. "What do you want, Sarah?" "I overheard what happened during the party. She spoke as if she weren't even there. And I have to admit I am quite disappointed in you. You didn't need to strike out at Phil like way. He has only ever attempted to help." I could not help but laugh at it. "Help? Are you serious now? Phil has only ever tried to help when it is convenient for him. He thinks this because he married you. He may walk into my life and claim to be my father. He is not, and he never will be." She stayed silent for a second, and I could see she disliked being called out. But then she did what she always does. Shifted the responsibility. "You know, your attitude is not going to get you anywhere. Jamie, you can't keep holding on to the past forever. Your father is not present anymore. Phil and I are." I was so angry that I had to bite my tongue for a second before saying something I couldn't take back. But I was done playing nice. "Yeah. You're here now, Sarah. Where were you when I was a child? When did I genuinely need you? Do not pretend like you're going to show up right now. Makes up for everything you did or did not do. She exhaled. She used to sigh, displeased, when I was a youngster, as if I were being tough for no reason. I realize I made mistakes, Jamie, but it wasn't easy for me either. I did my best, and you did your best too. I shut her off. The best you could do was leave me with Dad and rarely show up on weekends. You did not even try. You were not there, Sarah. So don't stand there telling me you done your best. There was another lengthy gap, and I could hear her struggle to think of anything to say. She eventually decided to go along. I'm Jamie's mother. You don't get to speak to me like way. I couldn't help it. I laughed again, but not because it was hilarious. It was simply ludicrous. You are my mommy. Really? Do you believe that title signifies anything since you gave birth to me? You forfeited your right to that a long time ago. You weren't a mother then, and you're not one anymore. That must have struck a chord, since her voice became angry and defensive. You have to quit living in the past. Jamie, you're going to regret taking us out of your life. Phil has always wanted to assist you, and you're throwing it back in his face at that time. I was finished. I'm over the guilt trips, the justifications, and her. Attempting to make myself the bad guy. No, Sarah. The only thing I regret is spending my time believing you would ever care. Do not call me again. With that, I hung up. I sat there for a few minutes, gazing at my phone and trying to digest everything. A part of me felt angry. I was irritated that she still hadn't gotten it. I was irritated that she was making me feel like the bad guy in this situation. But there's another part of me. I felt liberated, as if a burden I'd carried for years had finally been removed. I did not owe them anything. Not my time, not my forgiveness, nothing. But of course, it did not end there. Later that day, my cousin Brianna called. She's close to my age, and we've always gotten along well, so I assumed this call would be different, but nah. Jamie, I've heard what occurred. Are you okay? She started. It was genuine enough, so I let my guard down, . Yeah, I am fine. They just don't understand it. They never will. Brianna sighed, and I could already see where this was headed. I understand that you are unhappy, but don't you think you were a little harsh? Phil has been trying, and Sarah, well, she is still your mother, you know. I grumbled. Not you two, Brianna. I do not want to hear that. They did not try. They did not show up for me when it counted. And now they believe they can simply stroll back in and play family. It does not operate like that. I know, she responded, attempting to appear understanding. But they are still family. Maybe you could just meet them halfway. I could feel my patience running out. Meet them halfway. What about meeting me halfway for once in their lives? I'm done trying to make them feel better about what they did. Brianna was silent, and after a few awkward seconds, she simply responded, Okay, I understand it. I apologize if I overstepped. I didn't want to be angry with her. It wasn't her fault, but I was tired of everyone making excuses for Sarah and Phil, of everyone behaving as if it was my responsibility to mend things when they were the ones who ruined them. That night, I got down with Matt and explained everything that had transpired. He listened as usual and simply stated, You don't know anything about them, Jamie. You have done more than enough. It is acceptable to let go. And that's when I understood he was correct. I didn't need to carry this weight any longer. I didn't need their acceptance, approval, or their interpretation of family. I had my own life and future to construct with individuals who genuinely cared about me. So I banned Sarah's and Phil's phones. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. I believed that by banning Sarah and Phil, things would quiet down, I'd be able to relax, and they'd finally get the point. Of course they didn't. I should have known better. Instead, they escalated the situation. I wasn't responding to their calls or texts, so Phil thought the next best thing was to visit my flat. Yeah, you read that correctly. The guy came up at my front door unexpectedly, as if we were close or something. It was Saturday afternoon, and I was just sitting around trying to have a calm weekend. Matt was out running errands while I was catching up at home. I heard a knock on the door and wasn't expecting anyone, so I assumed it was either a package or a neighbor. But as I opened the door, Phil was standing there like if he belonged. I gazed at him, stunned for a while. What are you doing here? I eventually asked. I'm not even attempting to conceal the displeasure in my voice. We need to discuss. He stated it seriously, like if it were an intervention or something. You have been neglecting us, and that is not fair. We deserve the chance to explain ourselves. I crossed my arms and blocked the doorway. I've heard all of your justifications, Phil. They're quotes, nothing else to explain. He appeared irritated, as if he couldn't believe I wasn't simply letting him in. Jamie, this has lasted long enough. Your mother and I want to rectify this. We are your family, and you are shutting us out. I chuckled, not because it was humorous, but simply because it was so typical of him. Family. You can't just walk up and pretend like you've been a part of the family all along. Where were you while I was growing up? Where was Sarah? You can't simply ignore someone for half their life and then turn up when it's convenient. Phil took a step forward, attempting to make his way into the flat, but I refused to budge. We did not neglect you. Your dad. Don't. I cut him off with a strong voice. Don't you dare drag my father into this. He was there for me every day while Sarah abandoned me. You have no right to speak about him. I could see his face turning crimson, and I knew I had struck a nerve, but I didn't care. I was done with holding back. I am just saying, he started, plainly attempting to maintain his calm. Your father did not make things easy for us. He never allowed us to get close to you. I felt my blood boil. Are you kidding me? My father didn't make things difficult. Sarah did not even attempt. And you? You are just as awful. You showed up a few times and pretended to be doing me a favor. Don't pretend you've been a father figure to me. You were not there. Phil's expression tightened, and I could see he was becoming upset. Now, Jamie, you need to quit living in the past. You are an adult now. You cannot keep blaming your mother and myself for what occurred years ago. Oh, believe me, I am not living in the past, I shot back. But I'm not going to pretend that you and Sarah have changed. Just because you suddenly want to play happy families. You cannot alter history to make yourself feel better. Phil gave a disappointed groan and ran his hand through his hair. We've tried, Jamie. We've tried to put things right. But you continue to push us away. You're going to regret leaving us out like this. And there it was, the guilt trip. The same one Sarah attempted to pull. It seemed as if they had rehearsed this, but I wasn't buying it. Regret, I remarked, my voice full of cynicism. What am I meant to regret? I cut out the ones who were not available when I needed them. Let go of those who only show up when it is convenient for them. No, Phil, the only regret I have is that I let you and Sarah back into my life at all. He simply stood there, gazing at me, as if I were some ungrateful child who didn't value what he was providing. You're making a mistake, he remarked quietly and coldly. You will understand one day that you need us. I shook my head, done with the talk. No, Phil, I don't need you. I never did. And then I stepped back and slammed the door in his face. For a second. I simply stood there, my heart beating in my chest. I couldn't believe things had gotten to this. However, it felt as if a big weight had been lifted off my shoulders for the first time in years. I felt like I was finally free of all the guilt, pressure, and phony family rubbish that Sarah and Phil had been attempting to impose on me. Of course, it did not stop there. I heard him knock again, but this time louder. Jamie, open the door, he called through the door. His voice became angrier. Now, we're not finished, but we were finished. As far as I was concerned, we were done. I did not even bother answering. I simply went away from the door and sat on the couch, turning up the television to drown out the sound of his knocking. After a few minutes, he gave up and departed. Later that night, Sarah sent me a message. It was brief and passive-hostile, as predicted. I overheard what you did. You're going to regret this. I didn't bother responding. I removed the message and banned her phone again, this time permanently. When Matt got home and I told him what had happened, he just shook his head. I can't believe they're still not getting it, he remarked. You have been more than fair to them. Yeah, they're never going to comprehend it, I explained, and I'm finished trying to make them understand. And that was all. That was the moment I realized I owed them nothing. Not my time, not my forgiveness, not even a discussion. They had several years to be there for me. And they decided not to. So I decided to live my life without them. And for the first time, I felt comfortable with it.